The email from my sister arrived like a slap across the face, its words sharper than any knife. "Let's be honest, Megan. You're going nowhere with that business degree. Some of us actually have ambition." I stared at my phone, her message burning into my retinas as the fluorescent lights of my shared apartment kitchen flickered overhead. This is the story of how I went from being my family's greatest disappointment to signing their paychecks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The timestamp on Caroline's email read 11:42 p.m. She'd been drinking again. My older sister had always possessed a special talent for targeting insecurities with surgical precision, especially after her third glass of wine. I placed my phone face down on the scratched laminate countertop and tried to steady my breathing. It wasn't the first time she'd dismissed my dreams, but something about this particular message felt different. More final. More crushing. "You okay?" My roommate Delia glanced up from her textbook spread across our tiny kitchen table. Her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion from her nursing school all-nighter, still managed to convey genuine concern. "Just Caroline being Caroline," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like stretching plastic across my face. "Apparently my business degree is a waste of time, and I'm, quote, going nowhere." Delia rolled her eyes dramatically. "Your sister needs a hobby that isn't making you feel like crap." She slid a mug of tea across the counter toward me. "And you need to stop letting her opinions matter so much." She was right, of course. At 23, I should have developed immunity to Caroline's toxicity. But 30 years of conditioning isn't easily undone. Caroline had been the golden child since birth. Valedictorian, Ivy League scholarship, now crushing it at a prestigious consulting firm in Manhattan. Meanwhile, I was the family punchline, the late bloomer who settled for state college after taking a gap year that turned into 3. What Caroline and my parents didn't know, what they never bothered to ask about, was that those 3 years weren't spent aimlessly. I'd been building something that started as a side hustle during high school and had slowly evolved into a legitimate business plan. Digital marketing consulting for small businesses wasn't glamorous, but I'd discovered I had a knack for it. More importantly, I genuinely loved helping struggling entrepreneurs find their audience. The irony wasn't lost on me that Caroline spent her days advising multinational corporations on how to maximize profits through layoffs and restructuring, while I focused on keeping local businesses afloat. Different definitions of success, I supposed. I grabbed my laptop and retreated to my bedroom, a converted storage space barely large enough for a twin bed and desk. The walls were papered with post-it notes and whiteboard calendars tracking client deadlines. Not exactly the sleek Manhattan apartment Caroline boasted about in family group chats, but it was mine. And unlike her place, the rent didn't consume 70% of my income. As I settled onto my bed, I reopened Caroline's email. Reading it a second time, I noticed something I'd missed before. She'd CC'd our parents. My stomach clenched. Of course she had. Nothing quite like public humiliation to really drive the knife deeper. I scrolled down to see if they'd responded yet. Dad hadn't, which wasn't surprising. He'd mastered the art of staying out of sister rivalries decades ago. But Mom had chimed in with her typical peacekeeping attempt. "Girls, let's be supportive of each other's paths. Carolyn, your sister is working hard. Megan, maybe Caroline could give you some career advice." Career advice. Right. Because what I needed was Caroline's blueprint for success. Sacrifice personal relationships, work yourself to exhaustion, and climb over anyone in your way. No thanks. I closed the email thread and opened my business plan instead. Tomorrow I was meeting with a potential investor, my first real shot at scaling the consultancy beyond just me and my laptop. 3 years of detailed market research, competitor analysis, and documented case studies had led to this moment. If it went well, I could finally quit my part-time barista job and focus entirely on what I'd built. The financials page glowed on my screen, projections that showed modest but sustainable growth over 5 years. Not the hockey stick trajectory venture capitalists typically drooled over, but realistic, honest. The kind of business that could weather economic storms rather than burn bright and fast. My phone buzzed again. Caroline, following up. Did you get my email? Mom thinks I'm being too harsh, but someone needs to give you a reality check. You're almost 24 with nothing to show for it. I stared at the message, a familiar heaviness settling in my chest. Nothing to show for it. If only she knew about the 16 clients I'd helped in the past year. The businesses that had doubled their online revenue thanks to my strategies. The recommendation letters filling a folder in my email. If only she knew I was on the verge of something that mattered, at least to me. But explaining myself to Caroline had always been pointless. She'd decided who I was years ago, and no evidence would change that narrative. So instead of responding, I muted the conversation and turned back to my presentation. Tomorrow wasn't about proving Caroline wrong, it was about proving myself right. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through my blindless window. I'd fallen asleep surrounded by spreadsheets and sample marketing campaigns, my final preparation for the investor meeting cutting into valuable rest time. I jolted awake at the sound of my alarm, momentarily disoriented before remembering. Today was the day. The outfit I'd selected hung on the back of my door. A navy blazer thrifted for $12, but tailored to look much more expensive, paired with black slacks and the one nice blouse I owned. Not the designer wardrobe Caroline flaunted, but professional enough to be taken seriously. As I showered and dressed, I rehearsed my pitch silently, anticipating questions and practicing answers. By the time I applied my minimal makeup, I'd run through the entire presentation 3 times in my head. "You look nice," Delia commented as I emerged from the bathroom. She was already in her scrubs, preparing for a 12-hour clinical rotation. "Big meeting today, right?" I nodded, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my blazer. "With Alexander Martinez from Horizon Ventures. If he likes what he sees, it could change everything." "He will," she said, with the absolute confidence of someone who'd witnessed me working until 3 a.m. more times than either of us could count. "Just don't let your sister get in your head today, okay?" Easier said than done. Caroline had a permanent residence in my head. Her voice the background soundtrack to every moment of self-doubt. But today, I needed to evict her, at least temporarily. The coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet Alexander was 15 minutes from my apartment by bus. I'd chosen it carefully. Not too pretentious, but with enough serious business types to indicate it wasn't just a college hangout. As I settled into a corner table with my laptop and notes, I found myself obsessively checking my appearance in my phone's camera. Did I look professional enough? Was my hair too casual? Should I have worn my only pair of heels instead of flats? A text from my mother interrupted my spiral. "Good luck with your interview today, honey. Caroline says Horizon Ventures is very selective. We're proud of you for trying." The backhanded encouragement was so typical I almost laughed. Of course, Caroline knew about Horizon. She probably had the net worth of every venture capital partner memorized. And of course, my mother had to emphasize that I was trying rather than succeeding. Low expectations were their specialty when it came to me. Before I could craft a response, Alexander Martinez appeared at my table. He was younger than I'd expected, early 30s maybe, with a casual confidence that made his simple button-down and jeans look deliberate rather than underdressed. "Megan Walsh?" He extended his hand. "Sorry I'm a few minutes early. Traffic was lighter than expected." "No problem at all," I said, rising to shake his hand. "I appreciate your punctuality." He settled across from me, ordered a black coffee from the passing server, and opened a sleek leather portfolio. "So I've reviewed the materials you sent over. Digital marketing for small businesses is a crowded space. What makes your approach different?" And just like that, we were diving in. No small talk, no warming up. I appreciated his directness. It matched my own preferred style of communication, though Caroline had often labeled it as abrupt or lacking social graces. For the next 45 minutes, I walked Alexander through my business model, emphasizing the personalized approach that separated me from larger agencies that treated small businesses as an afterthought. I showed him case studies, client testimonials, and the technology stack I'd developed to streamline workflows. Most of my competitors are either solo consultants who can't scale or big agencies that charge minimum retainers beyond what local businesses can afford, I explained. I'm building the middle ground, Accessible expertise with systems that allow for growth without sacrificing the personal touch. Alexander nodded, making occasional notes. His poker face was impressive. I couldn't tell if he was intrigued or just being polite. When I finished my formal presentation, he closed his notebook and leaned back. "Your projections seem conservative," he said finally. It wasn't framed as a criticism, but my heart sank anyway. Conservative was corporate speak for unambitious. Exactly what Caroline always accused me of being. "They're realistic," I countered, trying to keep defensiveness from my voice. "I'm not promising unicorn growth, because that's not what this business is about. It's about sustainable expansion that doesn't compromise quality." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Alexander's expression softened slightly. "Actually, I appreciate the honesty. Too many pitches I see these days are divorced from reality. Tell me, if we decide to invest, what would your first priorities be?" The question sent a surge of hope through me. "If we" implied he wasn't the only decision maker, but also that there was genuine interest. I pulled up a slide I'd prepared for exactly this question. "3 immediate priorities," I said, pointing to my screen. "First, hiring 2 additional consultants to increase capacity. Second, investing in proprietary analytics software to better demonstrate ROI to clients. And third, targeted advertising to expand beyond word-of-mouth referrals." Quote, he studied the slide, then looked up with the first real smile of our meeting. "Practical. I like it." He closed his portfolio and stood. "I need to discuss this with my partners, but I think there's potential here. You've clearly done the work, and your client retention rate speaks volumes." We shook hands again, and he promised to be in touch within a week. As he left the coffee shop, I remained seated, letting the adrenaline slowly drain from my system. The meeting had gone well, maybe even very well, but experience had taught me not to celebrate prematurely. Still, I allowed myself a small moment of satisfaction. I'd presented my vision clearly and confidently, without the stammering or second-guessing that had plagued my early client pitches. Progress, even if incremental, was still progress. My phone buzzed with a text from Delia. "How'd it go? Tell me everything." As I typed a response, another message appeared. "Caroline again. Mom says you had some meeting today. Hope it went well. If you need me to look over any offers, let me know. Contract negotiation is kind of my thing." The condescension was palpable, even through text. Contract negotiation was her thing, because she'd spent years watching senior partners take advantage of desperate clients. Not exactly a skill set I aspired to. I ignored her message and finished updating Delia, then gathered my materials and headed to my afternoon shift at the coffee shop across town. The irony wasn't lost on me, pitching for investment in the morning, serving lattes in the afternoon. But the barista job had been my financial safety net while building the business, and I wasn't quite ready to let it go. The week that followed was excruciating. Every email notification, every phone call sent my heart racing, hoping it was Alexander with news. To distract myself, I threw my energy into client work, developing new campaigns and analyzing performance metrics with even more attention to detail than usual. On Friday afternoon, as I was updating a local bookstore's social media strategy, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered immediately, nearly dropping my device in my haste. "Megan Walsh speaking." "Megan, it's Alexander Martinez." His tone gave nothing away. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Absolutely," I said, closing my laptop and moving to a quieter corner of the apartment. "I've discussed your proposal with the partnership team, and we're interested in moving forward." He paused, and I held my breath. "However, we'd like to suggest some modifications to the investment structure." For the next 20 minutes, Alexander outlined their offer. $150,000 in seed funding, in exchange for a 15% equity stake, with the possibility of additional rounds if certain benchmarks were met. The terms were fair. Better than I'd dared hope for, actually. The only significant change from my original proposal was an accelerated timeline for expansion. "We believe you're thinking too small," Alexander explained. The model you've developed could work in multiple markets, not just locally. We'd like to see a plan for regional expansion within 18 months rather than 3 years. As we finished the call, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the preliminary term sheet he'd emailed over. It had happened. After years of side hustles and midnight strategy sessions, after countless dismissive comments from family members who saw my work as a hobby rather than a career, someone with serious money believed in my vision enough to invest in it. My first instinct was to call my parents, to finally have concrete evidence that I wasn't just playing business, as Caroline had once put it. But something stopped me. This moment wasn't about proving myself to them. It was about acknowledging how far I'd come on my own terms. Instead, I called Delia, who screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "We're celebrating tonight," she declared. "No arguments. Your days of being the underpaid barista/secret business genius are officially numbered." That evening, as Delia and I shared an affordable bottle of champagne on our fire escape, I finally allowed myself to fully process what had happened. This wasn't just seed funding. It was validation, professional, objective validation that couldn't be dismissed as luck or lowered standards. "To corner office Megan," Delia toasted, clinking her plastic cup against mine. "The future CEO who's going to make us all look bad at the 10-year reunion." I laughed, but felt a strange tightness in my throat. "I don't even know if I want a corner office. I just want to build something meaningful." "Then build it your way," she said simply. "That's the whole point of being the boss, right?" She was right. For the first time in my professional life, I had options. Real, tangible options that weren't defined by what Caroline or my parents thought success should look like. The path ahead wasn't certain. Startups failed every day, even with funding, but it was mine to navigate. Later that night, I finally responded to Caroline's earlier text. "Meeting went well. Secured seed funding for my business. Thanks for the offer, but I have a lawyer reviewing the contracts." Her response came almost immediately. "Wait, what? Someone actually invested in your little marketing thing? How much?" I smiled at the phone but didn't answer. Some details weren't meant for family group chats or sister rivalries. Some victories were sweeter when savored privately. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from my mother and a voicemail that oscillated between confusion and excitement. "Carolyn says you got some kind of investment? Dad and I had no idea your hobby was so serious. Call us back with details." My hobby. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, of sacrificed weekends and declined social invitations, reduced to a hobby. The familiar frustration bubbled up, but now it was tempered with something new, a quiet confidence that their perception no longer defined my reality. I returned the call while making coffee, keeping my tone deliberately casual. "Hey Mom, yes, I got investment for my business. It's been my full-time focus for a while now, just with the barista job to pay bills until things scaled up." "But why didn't you tell us?" she asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. "We could have helped, or at least supported you." The question was so absurd I almost laughed. "Mom, I've been talking about this business for years. You and Dad just never listened." The words came out more bluntly than intended, but I didn't regret their honesty. A long silence followed. "Well," she finally said, "we're listening now. And we're very proud of you. Even Caroline is impressed, though she's pretending not to be." The validation I'd once craved now felt hollow, arriving only after external confirmation of my worth, but I accepted it anyway. "Thanks, Mom. I have to go. Lots to do now that the funding's secured." As I ended the call, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time, I'd cut a conversation with my mother short because my work took precedence, not because I was hiding from criticism or avoiding comparison. My business wasn't just a refuge from family dynamics anymore. It was a legitimate priority that deserved my full attention. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. With Alexander's guidance, I registered the business as an LLC, opened proper commercial banking accounts, and began the process of hiring my first employees. Each step felt simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, the concrete manifestation of plans that had lived only in my head for so long. 3 months into building my newly funded business, I found myself sitting across from Lauren Mitchell, a potential hire with an impressive resume and the exact skill set I needed. The interview was going well until she asked the question I'd come to dread. So who founded this company? I'd love to hear about their vision. The assumptions stung. Another reminder that despite my title as CEO, many people still couldn't picture someone like me in charge. I smiled and straightened my shoulders. That would be me. I started this company out of my bedroom 3 years ago. The flicker of surprise in her eyes was subtle, but unmistakable. I had seen it dozens of times since securing funding. That moment of recalibration when people realized the young woman in modest business attire was the founder, not the assistant. That's impressive, Lauren said, recovering quickly. What made you focus on small business marketing specifically? As I explained my passion for helping local entrepreneurs compete in an increasingly digital marketplace, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. My one-person consultancy had transformed into a legitimate startup with 6 employees and an actual office, albeit a small one in a converted warehouse rather than the gleaming downtown high-rise Caroline worked in. After concluding the interview and showing Lauren out, I returned to my desk, positioned in the open workspace alongside my team rather than in a private office. My philosophy had always been that good ideas could come from anywhere, and I wanted to remain accessible. Still, there were moments when I craved the privacy of closed doors, especially when dealing with family. My phone lit up with a notification. Caroline had tagged me in a social media post, a rare occurrence that immediately put me on alert. Opening the app, I found a photo of her standing beside a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, both smiling broadly in what appeared to be a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The caption read, "Excited to announce my promotion to senior partner at Westfield Consulting, youngest female partner in firm history. Special thanks to mentor extraordinaire Richard Westfield for believing in me. #female leadership, #breaking glass ceilings." Before I could process my complicated reaction, my phone rang. Mom calling, predictably. I answered with resignation, knowing exactly what was coming. "Did you see Caroline's news?" She didn't bother with hello. "Senior partner at 31. We're thinking of hosting a celebration dinner next weekend. You'll come home for it, right?" Home was a loaded term. The suburban house where I'd grown up feeling perpetually inadequate, measuring myself against Caroline's stream of accomplishments, and invariably coming up short. I hadn't visited in months, using work as a convenient excuse. "I'll check my calendar," I said non-committally. "We're in the middle of a growth phase, and my schedule is pretty tight. Megan." My mother's voice took on that familiar tone, part disappointment, part manipulation. "Your sister's achievement is a big deal. Surely your little marketing business can spare you for one weekend." My little marketing business. 6 months of proven success, a team that depended on me, clients whose revenue had doubled thanks to our strategies, all diminished with a single adjective. "It's not little anymore, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice even. "We're projecting 7 figures this year." A brief silence followed. "Well, that's nice. But this is family, Megan, and it's just one dinner. Just one dinner where Caroline would hold court, where relatives would ask pointed questions about when my business would get serious, or whether I'd considered a more stable career path. Just one dinner where, despite my own successes, I'd be relegated to supporting character in Caroline's ongoing narrative of excellence. "I'll let you know," I said finally, ending the call before she could press further. Turning back to my computer, I opened the financial projections Alexander had helped me refine. We weren't just on track. We were exceeding targets across all metrics. Client acquisition costs were lower than anticipated, retention rates higher. The regional expansion Alexander had pushed for was happening ahead of schedule, with new clients signing on in 3 neighboring states. None of this would impress my family as much as Caroline's corner office and corporate title. But it wasn't for them anymore. It was for me, for my team, and for the businesses we were genuinely helping. My assistant Jamie knocked gently on my desk, interrupting my thoughts. "The Riverside Bookstore campaign results are in," he said, sliding a tablet toward me. "Their online sales are up 87% compared to last quarter." They're asking if you'll personally handle their holiday strategy. I glanced at the data, a smile spreading across my face. Riverside had been one of my first clients, a struggling independent bookstore on the verge of closing when they hired me. Now they were thriving, hosting events and building a loyal online customer base alongside their brick-and-mortar presence. Tell them absolutely yes, I replied. Block out time next week for a planning session. This was the work that mattered. Measurable impact on real businesses, not artificial prestige or fancy titles. Yet as I continued through my day, Caroline's announcement lingered in the back of my mind, an unwelcome reminder of the validation I still sometimes craved. That evening, as I locked up the office after everyone else had left, my phone buzzed with a text from Caroline herself, a rare direct communication. Mom says you're being difficult about the dinner. Don't make this about you. Some of Dad's business associates will be there. Good networking opportunity for your little startup. The condescension was so habitual she probably didn't even recognize it anymore. I considered ignoring the message, but something pushed me to respond truthfully. Congratulations on your promotion. I'm genuinely happy for you. But my little startup is in a critical growth phase, and weekend work is the norm right now. I'll try to make it, but I can't promise. Her reply came quickly. Still playing entrepreneur instead of getting a real job, I see. Let me know when you're ready for some actual career advice. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar mixture of hurt and anger. Her dismissiveness always provoked. But this time, something else cut through those emotions. Pity. Caroline's entire identity was wrapped up in external validation, in titles and corner offices, and the approval of men like Richard Westfield. My sister was climbing a ladder without ever questioning if it was leaning against the right wall. Instead of responding with defensiveness, I simply wrote, I'm proud of what I'm building. I hope you're genuinely happy with what you've achieved too. She didn't reply. The following week brought unexpected developments. A national business magazine included our company in their 20 Under 30 Inches feature, a brief profile highlighting promising startups and their founders. It wasn't a major publication, but it was legitimate industry recognition. More significantly, one of our local success stories, a family-owned restaurant whose online ordering system we'd revolutionized, was featured on a popular food blog, with generous credit given to our marketing strategies. The exposure brought a flood of inquiries from similar businesses nationwide. Alexander called as I was reviewing these new leads. I just saw the feature, he said without preamble, and the restaurant coverage. You're building momentum faster than projected. We're trying to be selective about new clients, I explained. Maintaining quality while scaling is tricky. That's why I wanted to discuss next steps, he replied. The partners are impressed with your execution. We're prepared to lead your Series A round earlier than planned. We're thinking $2 million. The figure took my breath away. $2 million was 20 times my parents' combined annual income, more money than I'd ever conceptualized having control over. It would allow for the national expansion we'd tentatively planned for year 3, accelerating our growth timeline dramatically. That's substantial, I managed, trying to sound professionally composed rather than overwhelmed. Alexander chuckled. Your competition isn't sitting still, Megan. There's a window of opportunity here, but it won't stay open forever. Think about what you could do with proper capitalization. After ending the call with a promise to consider the offer, I sat quietly at my desk, processing the implications. Faster growth meant higher stakes, more employees depending on me, greater visibility, and greater potential for public failure. But it also meant the ability to help more businesses, to create more jobs, to build something truly meaningful at a scale I hadn't dared imagine. My contemplation was interrupted by a call from my father, an unusual occurrence that immediately put me on alert. Megan, he began awkwardly, your mother wanted me to call about the dinner this weekend. Caroline's firm is sending a photographer, and they'd like family photos. It would look strange if you weren't there. Of course. Appearances. The Walsh family specialty. Dad, I said carefully, I'm in the middle of negotiating a multi-million-dollar investment round. I have potential hires to interview and clients counting on deliverables. This isn't about sibling rivalry, it's about running a real business with real responsibilities. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of misunderstanding. Finally, he cleared his throat. Did you say multi-million? It was such a quintessentially dad response that I almost laughed. Financial scale was the only measure of success he truly comprehended. Yes, Dad. 2 million, potentially. We're growing faster than projected. I had no idea, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. Your mother said you had some investors, but we thought it was, small time. The familiar frustration rose again. You never asked for details, Dad. Not once in 3 years. Another uncomfortable silence. Well, I'm asking now. And surprisingly, he was. For the next 20 minutes, my father actually listened as I explained our business model, our growth trajectory, our vision for the future. He asked relevant questions about revenue streams and market positioning. It was possibly the longest, most genuine conversation we'd ever had about my professional life. I had no idea, he repeated when I finished. This sounds substantial. It is, I confirmed. Which is why a family dinner for Caroline's promotion, while important, may not be my top priority right now. He sighed. I understand, but if there's any way you could make it work. Your mother has her heart set on having both her girls there. And Caroline. He paused. Caroline could use some family support right now. Things at the firm aren't as perfect as they seem. This was news. What do you mean? It's not my place to say. He hedged. Just, your sister puts a lot of pressure on herself. The promotion came with complications. I recognized the protective note in his voice, the same one he'd used throughout our childhood when shielding Caroline from consequences. But this time, it sounded less like favoritism and more like genuine concern. I'll try, I said finally. But I can't stay the whole weekend. Saturday dinner only, and I'll need to leave Sunday morning. That's all we're asking, he replied, relief evident. And Megan, I'm proud of what you're doing. I should have said that sooner. The validation I'd once desperately craved now felt strangely unnecessary. Appreciated, but not essential. My worth was no longer measured in parental approval or sibling comparison. Still, the words warmed something long cold inside me. Thanks, Dad. That means something. Saturday arrived with a mix of dread and determination. I'd spent the morning on calls with Alexander's team, discussing terms for the new investment round, then driven 3 hours to my parents' suburban home. As I pulled into the familiar driveway, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I wasn't the same person who had left years ago, uncertain, defensive, constantly seeking validation. The house looked smaller somehow, though nothing had changed. My mother answered the door with a quick hug, an immediate commentary on my appearance. Couldn't you have worn something more festive? Caroline's wearing that beautiful blue dress she bought in Milan. I glanced down at my simple black cocktail dress, professional, elegant, and perfectly appropriate for a family dinner. This is fine, Mom. How can I help with dinner? The evening proceeded predictably at first. Caroline held court in the living room, detailing her promotion to an audience of admiring relatives and family friends. I helped my mother in the kitchen, fielding the usual questions about whether I was seeing anyone or planning to settle down. What wasn't predictable was Caroline herself. Beneath her polished exterior and practiced smiles, something seemed off. Her laugh was too loud, her gestures slightly too expansive. When our eyes occasionally met across the room, I caught glimpses of something I'd rarely associated with my perfect sister: vulnerability. Dad's cryptic comment about complications echoed in my mind. What wasn't she saying about this supposedly prestigious promotion? My opportunity to find out came unexpectedly when I found Caroline alone in the upstairs bathroom, gripping the sink with white knuckles, her carefully applied makeup showing traces of having been hastily repaired. Are you okay? I asked, genuinely concerned despite our strained relationship. She straightened immediately, professional mask sliding back into place. Fine, just a headache. These events are exhausting. These events meaning family dinner in your honor? something flickered across her face. Irritation, perhaps, or resignation. Not everything is as perfect as it looks, Megan. It was the closest thing to a genuine moment we'd shared in years. I decided to take a risk. Dad mentioned there were complications with your promotion. What did he mean? Caroline's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her champagne glass. For a moment, I thought she'd deflect as usual, but then her shoulders sagged slightly. Richard is retiring next year, she said quietly. The promotion comes with the expectation that I'll take over his client portfolio, including Wilson Financial. The name meant nothing to me, but her expression told me it should. And that's bad? A bitter laugh escaped her. Wilson Financial is currently under SEC investigation for potential fraud. Nothing public yet, but internally, let's just say there are concerns. Richard is conveniently stepping away before it explodes, and I get to be the face associated with the fallout. I stared at her, processing this unexpected vulnerability. Can't you refuse the client? And throw away 10 years of work? She shook her head. This partnership was everything I've been working toward. I just have to navigate the situation carefully. The conversation was interrupted by our mother calling everyone to dinner, but that brief exchange shifted something between us. As we took our seats around the dining table, Caroline at one end, naturally, I saw my sister with new eyes. Her success, which I'd always perceived as effortless, suddenly looked heavy with compromise and uncertainty. Throughout dinner, as relatives toasted Caroline's achievement and she accepted their congratulations with practiced grace, I noticed the slight strain around her eyes, the way she checked her phone frequently beneath the table. The corporate world she'd dedicated her life to was showing its true colors, and the golden child was discovering that even she wasn't immune to its politics. When the inevitable questions about my work finally came, I was prepared for the usual dismissive comments. But Caroline surprised me again. Megan's company was featured in Business Innovators last week, she said, interrupting our aunt's vague inquiry about my marketing hobby. They're expanding nationally, actually. The table fell momentarily silent. Caroline acknowledging my success was unprecedented. It's just a small profile, I said modestly. But yes, we're growing faster than projected. She's being modest, Caroline continued, an unfamiliar note in her voice that almost sounded like respect. Her client retention rate is exceptional. That's hard to achieve in any industry. I stared at her, wondering what game she was playing, but there was no hint of sarcasm or hidden agenda in her expression, just a straightforward acknowledgement of fact. The conversation soon shifted to other topics, but that moment lingered. Something had fundamentally changed in our dynamic, though I couldn't yet define what or why. After dinner, as guests began to leave and my parents busied themselves with cleanup, Carolyn approached me on the back porch, where I'd stepped out for a moment of quiet. I saw your company's numbers, she said without preamble. Dad showed me the overview you sent him. I bristled slightly. Those were confidential projections. She waved away my concern. Relax. I'm not going to steal your business model. I'm just impressed. You've built something legitimate. The backhanded compliment was so typically Caroline that I had to laugh. Thanks for the validation. I can finally rest easy knowing my little marketing business meets your approval. Her expression tightened, then softened unexpectedly. I deserved that. I've been dismissive of your work. But in my defense, you never really talked about it either. Would you have listened if I had? The question hung between us, honest in a way our interactions rarely were. To my surprise, Caroline didn't immediately deflect. Probably not, she admitted. I've been focused on my own path. We stood in silence for a moment, the cool evening air filled with the sound of crickets and distant laughter from inside. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't hostile, just contemplative. Why marketing? She asked suddenly. You could have done anything. You were always good with numbers. Better than me, actually, though I'd never have admitted it. The question caught me off guard. Caroline had never shown interest in my motivations before. I like helping businesses tell their stories, I answered honestly, especially small businesses that might not otherwise survive in a digital world. It's rewarding in a way I didn't expect. She nodded slowly. Rewarding. That's not a word I'd use to describe my job lately. Because of the Wilson situation? That and other things? She sipped her wine, staring out at our parents' meticulously maintained garden. Do you remember Mrs. Abernathy's bookstore, where we used to hide out after school? The question seemed random, but I nodded. Of course. Riverside Books. They're actually one of my clients now. Caroline's head snapped toward me. Seriously? They're still open? I thought they closed years ago. They almost did, but we revamped their online presence, helped them start virtual book clubs during the pandemic, created targeted campaigns to reach new customers. They're doing well now, expanding even. Something that looked almost like wistfulness crossed Caroline's face. That actually matters. You're helping places that matter. The simple acknowledgement felt more significant than any professional achievement. My sister, the perpetual golden child, the measuring stick against which I'd always fallen short, was recognizing value in my choices. What about you? I asked carefully. Does your work matter in the way you want it to? She didn't answer immediately, swirling the wine in her glass with practiced precision. It used to feel important, she said finally. Like I was helping build something. Now it's just politics and optics and damage control. She laughed without humor. Do you know what Richard told me when he announced my promotion? You're perfect for this role because you're photogenic and female. The diversity optics will help distract from any negative press. I winced. That's my entire career summed up in one sentence. She finished bitterly. 10 years of 60-hour weeks, sacrificing relationships, health, any semblance of work-life balance. And I'm still just a pretty face for the annual report. The raw honesty between us felt fragile and precious. A moment of genuine connection I hadn't thought possible anymore. Before I could respond, the patio door slid open, and our mother appeared. There you two are, Caroline, the Westfields just arrived. They want photos with you before the photographer leaves. Just like that, the moment shattered. Caroline straightened, professional mask sliding seamlessly back into place. Coming, Mom. But as she turned to go, she paused beside me. We should talk again. Actually talk. Maybe coffee next week? It was a small olive branch, but significant coming from her. I'd like that, I replied, meaning it. 2 weeks after Caroline's celebration dinner, I found myself in a sleek downtown high-rise, sitting across from the board of directors at Wilson Financial. The very company my sister had mentioned was under investigation. Their CEO, Martin Wilson himself, had reached out after seeing our feature in Business Innovators, requesting a meeting to discuss potentially overhauling their digital presence. We're looking for a fresh approach, Martin explained, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. Our current marketing strategy feels outdated. What he wasn't saying, what the entire room knew based on the tension vibrating through the air, was that Wilson Financial desperately needed image rehabilitation. Though nothing had been publicly confirmed, industry rumors about the SEC investigation had begun circulating. They needed a narrative makeover, and they were willing to pay handsomely for it. It would be our biggest client yet. The contract they were proposing would exceed our annual revenue from all other clients combined. The prestige of having a national financial services firm in our portfolio would open doors I hadn't even thought to knock on yet. But as Martin outlined what they were looking for, essentially a strategic distraction campaign to shift focus away from their internal issues, something Caroline had said echoed in my mind. You're helping places that matter. Did Wilson Financial matter? Would helping them maintain a polished facade while they potentially mismanaged clients, money align with the values I'd built my company around? This all sounds promising, I said carefully, but before we move forward, I'd need complete transparency about the company's current situation. Our strategies work best when we're addressing reality, not covering it up. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Martin's smile tightened. I'm not sure what you're implying, Ms. Walsh. We're simply looking to modernize our public presence. I understand, I replied evenly. But effective marketing stems from authenticity. If there are challenges the company is facing, acknowledging them can actually build trust with your audience. Covering them up inevitably backfires. One of the board members, a silver-haired woman whose name badge identified her as Patricia Huang, leaned forward with interest. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if there are regulatory concerns or compliance issues, addressing them head-on through transparent communication would serve you better long-term than any distraction strategy. Martin's face had grown progressively redder during this exchange. We're not here to discuss internal matters, he said sharply. We're here to discuss marketing services. I gathered my materials and stood. Then I'm afraid we're not the right fit for your needs. Our approach requires alignment between external messaging and internal reality. I wish you the best in finding a partner whose values align with yours. The silence as I left the conference room was deafening. I'd just walked away from what would have been our most lucrative contract to date, the kind of client that could have accelerated our growth trajectory dramatically. Yet instead of regret, I felt an unexpected lightness. Back at our office, I called an impromptu team meeting to explain what had happened. I turned down Wilson Financial. I announced to my gathered employees, whose expressions ranged from shock to confusion. Their expectations didn't align with our values. But that contract would have been huge, Jamie protested. We've been talking about expanding to the financial sector for months. It would have been huge, I agreed. And fundamentally at odds with why we built this company. They wanted us to help distract from potential misconduct, not create authentic connection with their audience. The room fell silent as my team processed this. Finally, Lauren, who had indeed accepted our job offer after her interview, spoke up. I left my last position because they kept prioritizing profits over principles. It's refreshing to see leadership actually live by their stated values. Her words validated the decision I'd been questioning since leaving the Wilson building. Had I made a mistake? Had I let personal feelings about Caroline's situation influence a business decision? But Lauren's perspective reminded me why I'd started this journey in the first place. Not to become another soulless corporate entity, but to build something meaningful. Something with integrity at its core. We'll find other clients, I assured the team. Ones whose success we can genuinely celebrate, not just profit from. Later that afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered cautiously, half expecting an angry call from Martin Wilson. Is this Megan Walsh? A woman's voice asked. Speaking, I replied. This is Patricia Huang. We met earlier today at Wilson Financial. I straightened in my chair, surprised. Yes, Ms. Wang, what can I do for you? You can meet me for coffee tomorrow, she said briskly. I've been watching your company with interest for some time, and today's meeting only confirmed my impressions. I'm not calling on behalf of Wilson. This is personal. Curiosity piqued. I agreed to meet her at a cafe near her office the following morning. When I arrived, Patricia was already seated, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car. Thank you for meeting me, she began, once I'd settled across from her. What you did yesterday, walking away from that contract, was either incredibly foolish or remarkably principled. I'm inclined to believe the latter. I appreciate that, I said cautiously, still unsure of her agenda. She sipped her coffee, studying me over the rim of her cup. I've been on Wilson's board for 3 years. Before that, I was CEO of Meridian Trust for 15. I know this industry inside and out, and I've watched too many good companies compromise their values for short-term gain. Is that what's happening at Wilson? I asked directly. Patricia's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes hardened. I'm bound by confidentiality agreements, so I can't discuss specific internal matters, but I can tell you that your instincts were correct. The company is at a crossroads, and unfortunately, Martin is choosing the path of least resistance rather than meaningful reform. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm impressed by you, she replied simply, and because I'm in a position to do something about it. I sit on several boards and have extensive connections throughout the financial industry. There are institutions committed to ethical practices who could benefit from your approach to authentic marketing. My heartbeat quickened. Are you offering to make introductions? Quote, I'm offering more than that, Patricia said, sliding a business card across the table. I've recently established a venture fund focused on supporting women-led businesses with strong ethical frameworks. Your company fits our investment criteria perfectly. I stared at the card, which identified Patricia as managing partner at Horizon Equity Partners. You're an investor. She smiled for the first time. Among other things. Alexander Martinez speaks highly of you, by the way. We've known each other for years. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. You're connected to Horizon Ventures. To my original investor. Patricia nodded. Alexander and I share investment philosophies. We believe businesses can be both profitable and purposeful. Your decision yesterday only confirmed what he's been telling me, that you're building something with integrity, not just another agency chasing dollars. By the time our coffee meeting concluded, Patricia had offered to lead our next investment round at significantly better terms than I'd been discussing with Alexander's team. More importantly, she'd promised introductions to financial institutions whose values aligned with ours. Clients who would value transparency and authentic communication rather than seeking a cover-up service. As I walked back to my office, I marveled at how differently the situation had unfolded from what I'd feared. Walking away from Wilson Financial hadn't been a setback. It had been the catalyst for an even better opportunity. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Still on for coffee tomorrow? There's something I need to discuss with you. We'd rescheduled our coffee meeting twice due to her work commitments, but it seemed she was finally making it a priority. I confirmed and continued my walk, wondering what my sister might want to discuss. After our moment of connection at the dinner, something had shifted between us, but it remained fragile, undefined. The following day, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, selecting a quiet table in the corner that would allow for private conversation. When Caroline walked in, precisely on time as always, I was struck by how different she looked from her usual polished self. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup except for a touch of mascara. Instead of her typical designer workwear, she wore jeans and a casual sweater. You look different, I observed as she sat down. She managed a tired smile. I took a personal day. First one in 3 years that wasn't for a medical appointment or family obligation. The waitress took our orders, a complicated espresso drink for Caroline, simple black coffee for me, and then we were alone, face to face for the first real conversation we'd had in years. So, I began, unsure how to navigate this unfamiliar territory of sisterly connection. How are things with the Wilson Financial situation? Caroline grimaced. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. They approached your company for marketing services, didn't they? I nodded, surprised. How did you know? Martin Wilson called Richard, furious that you'd walked away from the meeting. Apparently, you suggested they should be transparent about their issues rather than trying to cover them up. A hint of admiration crept into her voice. That took guts. It just seemed like the right call, I said simply. Their values didn't align with ours. Caroline laughed, but there was no humor in it. Values. That's not a word that comes up often in my professional circles. She stirred her coffee absently. The Wilson situation is worse than I initially thought. The SEC investigation is just the beginning. There are internal documents suggesting deliberate misrepresentation to investors going back years. I stared at her, processing the implications. And you're being set up to take the fall if it goes public. Bingo! She took a long sip of her drink. Richard's mentorship was never about developing my career. It was about creating a convenient scapegoat with a female face. Diversity optics work both ways. We're great for annual reports and even better for public apologies. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, but beneath it I heard something else. Resolution. What are you going to do? Caroline met my eyes directly. I've been asking myself what you would do. The statement shocked me into silence. My sister, who had always been the standard bearer, the one I measured myself against, was looking to me for guidance? That's unexpected. I managed finally. Is it? She shrugged. You've built something real, Megan. Something with integrity. I've spent 10 years climbing a ladder only to discover it's propped against a house of cards. The metaphor was surprisingly poetic coming from my pragmatic sister. So what's your next move? I've been documenting everything, she said quietly. Every questionable directive, every instance where I was asked to misrepresent information or obscure concerns. I've compiled it all and sent copies to my personal email and a secure cloud storage. I felt a chill at the implications. Caroline, that's whistleblowing, she finished for me. Yes, I'm aware of the potential consequences. But after seeing you walk away from that contract, choosing principles over profit, I couldn't keep playing along. The revelations stunned me. My sister, who had always prioritized professional advancement above all else, was preparing to risk everything for ethical principles. Have you thought this through completely? I asked carefully. Whistleblowing could end your career in that industry. She nodded, surprisingly calm. I've been thinking about nothing else for weeks, and you know what I realized? I hate my job. I hate the culture, the values, the relentless focus on profit at any cost. I've spent a decade trying to prove myself in an environment that was never going to value what actually matters. And what does matter to you? I asked, genuinely curious about the answer. We'd never really discussed our deeper motivations or values before. Carolyn was quiet for a moment, considering. Making a positive impact, she said finally. Contributing something meaningful rather than just extracting value. The same things that matter to you, I suspect. I just lost sight of them somewhere along the way. As our conversation continued, Caroline outlined her plan. She would submit her documentation to the SEC's whistleblower program, which offered both protection and potential financial reward. She had already consulted with an attorney specializing in securities law and corporate ethics. The process was risky but necessary if she wanted to sleep at night. What will you do afterward? I asked. If you're essentially blacklisted from corporate consulting? She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. That's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. I've been following your company's growth, reading everything I could find about your approach and philosophy. I think I might have something to contribute to what you're building. It took a moment for her meaning to register. Are you asking for a job? Not exactly, she clarified quickly. I'm suggesting a partnership. You've built an incredible foundation focused on authentic marketing for businesses that deserve to succeed. What if we expanded that mission to include ethical business consulting, helping companies align their internal practices with their external messaging? The idea was compelling, a natural evolution of what I'd been building, with the added benefit of Caroline's insider knowledge of corporate structures and compliance issues. But it would mean working closely with my sister, navigating our complicated history and different approaches to business. We'd kill each other within a week, I said, only half joking. Caroline laughed, a real laugh this time. Maybe. Or maybe we'd balance each other out. Your creativity and my structure. Your vision and my execution. It's worth considering, isn't it? To my surprise, it was. The idea of combining our complementary strengths to build something neither of us could create alone held undeniable appeal. And there was something poetic about the golden child and the underachiever becoming true equals, true partners. Let me think about it, I said finally. And let's see how the whistleblowing situation plays out first. One major life change at a time. She nodded, understanding. Fair enough. But regardless of what you decide about working together, thank you for showing me there's another way to define success. I might have continued down that path indefinitely if I hadn't seen the alternative you've created. As we parted ways, I felt a profound shift in our relationship, no longer defined by competition or comparison, but by mutual respect and the recognition of different but equally valuable strengths. The weeks that followed brought dramatic changes. Caroline submitted her documentation to the SEC, triggering an expanded investigation into Wilson Financial's practices. When news of the investigation became public, the company's stock plummeted, and several board members, including Martin Wilson himself, were forced to resign. Caroline, protected by whistleblower statutes but still facing professional ostracism, gave her notice at Westfield Consulting. The firm, desperate to distance itself from the Wilson scandal, accepted her resignation with minimal resistance. Our parents, predictably, were horrified by her decision to walk away from her prestigious position. "You had a corner office," our mother lamented during a tense family dinner. "Senior partner at 31. How could you throw that away?" Caroline, with a newfound serenity I'd never seen in her before, simply smiled. "Because a corner office isn't worth compromising who I am, Mom. I've spent too long chasing external validation at the expense of internal peace." The wisdom in her words struck me deeply. How many of our choices, both Caroline's and mine, had been driven by the desire for validation? How much energy had we wasted trying to prove our worth through achievements rather than authenticity? Meanwhile, my company continued its expansion with Patricia Huang's investment and connections. We hired 3 new team members, moved to a larger office space, and began developing the ethical business consulting division Caroline had proposed. Though she wasn't officially on board yet, she contributed ideas and insights as a consultant while she navigated the aftermath of her whistleblowing. 4 months after our coffee shop conversation, I invited Caroline to our office for an official tour and discussion about the partnership we'd been informally exploring. As I showed her around the space, introducing her to team members, explaining our project management systems, sharing our vision for the future, I noticed something remarkable. She was genuinely listening, genuinely interested, without the dismissive filter that had characterized our interactions for years. We ended the tour in my office. Not a corner office, but a thoughtfully designed space with glass walls that kept me connected to the team while allowing for private conversations when needed. "So what do you think?" I asked as we settled into the comfortable chairs I'd selected for client meetings. "Could you see yourself here?" Caroline looked around, taking in the awards displayed on my bookshelf, the vision board covered with client success stories, the framed print that read, "Measure success by impact, not income." "It's not what I pictured," she admitted. "It's better. There's an energy here, a sense of purpose that I never felt at Westfield." "We work hard," I acknowledged, "but we work for things that matter. And we celebrate authentically when we succeed." "That's what I want," she said simply. "To build something real, something I can be proud of, not just for how it looks on a resume, but for the actual value it creates." We spent the next 2 hours outlining what a formal partnership might look like: equity distribution, role definition, integration of her expertise into our existing services. By the time we finished, a clear path forward had emerged. Caroline would join as Chief Compliance Officer, leading our new ethical business consulting division, while I continued as CEO, focusing on our core marketing services and overall company vision. "There's one more thing I want to show you," I said as we prepared to leave. I led her to a door at the end of the hallway, a space I hadn't included in the initial tour. "What's this?" she asked as I unlocked it. "Your office," I replied, swinging the door open to reveal a bright, airy room with large windows and minimalist furnishings. "If you decide to accept the partnership. It's not a corner office with a Manhattan view, but—" "It's perfect," she interrupted, stepping inside and turning slowly to take it all in. "It's exactly what I want." The following Monday, Caroline officially joined the company. We announced the partnership with a simple press release that emphasized our complementary strengths and shared commitment to ethical business practices. The industry response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Caroline's whistleblowing had earned her respect in circles that valued integrity over status, and our combined expertise positioned us uniquely in the market. Our parents' reaction was more complicated. Dad, ever focused on financial metrics, was cautiously supportive once he understood the business potential of our partnership. Mom struggled more with the shift in narrative, her golden child stepping away from corporate prestige to join her underachieving daughter's company challenged everything she thought she understood about success. "I just don't understand why you couldn't have brought Megan into your firm instead," she lamented during our first family dinner after the announcement. Westfield has such name recognition. Caroline and I exchanged glances across the table, a moment of silent communication that would have been impossible months earlier. "Mom," Caroline said gently, "Megan built something valuable entirely on her own terms. I'm joining her company because it represents the future I want to be part of, not because I couldn't find another corporate position. But Mom began, only to be cut off by Dad. Helen, he said firmly, both our daughters are successful business leaders following their own paths. Maybe it's time we recognize that success doesn't always look the way we expected it to. The simple acknowledgement that both of us had found valid paths to success felt like the closing of a chapter that had defined our family dynamics for decades. 6 months into our partnership, the company had nearly doubled in size. Our ethical business consulting division, led by Caroline, had attracted clients specifically seeking to align their internal practices with their external messaging. My core marketing team continued developing authentic strategies for businesses committed to creating real value. On a Friday afternoon, as we prepared for our weekly leadership meeting, Caroline stopped by my office with 2 coffee cups in hand. "Thought you might need this," she said, placing one on my desk. "You've been in back-to-back calls all day." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gesture. "How's the Meridian Trust proposal coming along?" "Finished it this morning," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Their CEO was impressed with our approach. Said it was refreshing to work with consultants who prioritize sustainability over short-term gains." I smiled, remembering how differently those words would have landed with the Caroline of a year ago. "You've really transformed that division. The client feedback has been incredible." She shrugged, but I could see she was pleased by the recognition. "It's easier to excel when you believe in what you're doing." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee and enjoying the rare quiet in an otherwise bustling office. Through the glass walls, I could see our team collaborating, laughing, creating together, a vision of work that prioritized both humanity and excellence. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked suddenly. "The prestige, the corner office, being the youngest female partner in firm history?" Caroline considered the question seriously. "I miss certain aspects, the resources, sometimes the clarity of defined hierarchies. But no, I don't miss who I had to become to succeed in that environment." She looked at me directly. "Do you ever regret not taking a more traditional path, following in my footsteps the way everyone expected?" It was my turn to reflect honestly. "I used to. For years I measured myself against your achievements and found myself lacking. But now I understand we were climbing different mountains all along." "And yours had a better view," she added with a smile. "Different view," I corrected. "Not better or worse, just aligned with what actually matters to me." As we gathered our materials for the leadership meeting, I paused at my office doorway, struck by how far we'd both come, not just professionally, but personally. The siblings who had once defined themselves in opposition to each other had found their way to mutual respect, to genuine collaboration, to appreciation of different strengths and perspectives. "You know," Caroline said, reading my expression with newfound sensitivity, "Mom asked me last week if I was happy with my demotion, as if joining a thriving company with authentic purpose somehow ranked below having a fancy title in a soul-crushing environment." I laughed. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I finally understand what real success looks like," Caroline replied. "It's not about the corner office or the prestigious address. It's about building something meaningful, something aligned with your values, and doing it on your own terms." As we walked together toward the conference room where our team awaited, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, from bitter rivalry to genuine partnership, from external validation to internal alignment, from corner offices to authentic purpose. The path hadn't been straight or simple, but it had led exactly where we both needed to be. "I guess we both ended up with corner offices after all," I mused. "Just not the kind anyone expected." Caroline smiled, understanding my meaning perfectly. "The best kind. The kind we chose for ourselves." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.